view, that we don't really know what we're doing because we get on the wrong track so often. It's easy to get into a defensive position and to act as though we're under great duress and we have to fight back, rather than thinking about ways that we can be constructive about seeing what's really happened, and then look in our hearts and find the right answers. And that's what I've been focusing on. And thanks to your help, I have focused on that even more. So I appreciate that.
Oh, Len, you know, it's only natural. It's so easy for our survival mind to get kicked in these times. And it's a natural response for us to start moving with this energy. I think everybody who's listening right now knows that it's an overwhelming time, and they've been feeling overwhelmed, and you get input from so many different directions, and you hear things from your friends, you hear it from the media. I get it from my nephews, and where they dig up some of this information is amazing.
I
But
know.
it's a battering, and it's very difficult to find your center in the midst of it all.
Oh, and a lot of it's discordant too. You read one thing in one place, one in another. And I've probably spent 500 or 600 hours researching on COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter and the things that are in the news today. And I get confused, and I'm a doctor, and I'm confused about what the right answer is, but it's starting to form a puzzle that's taking shape. And I think we are on a track here where if we could just unite and start seeing things together from a heartfelt position, rather than one that's aggressive and warlike and fighting back, because that's just what the people who are trying to stop us from doing the right thing are thinking about.
It's impossible to explain why other people do anything. It's impossible to get into the heads of another person.
You're right.
Whether it's the leadership or whether it's a person who's caught up in the swell of emotion. This is life. And it's been going on for thousands of years. We know this. We're in it now, so it seems like it's the most important and most crazy time in history. But talk to an elder, look at history, and realize this is a repetitive process of unfolding of what humans do. And the big question is, where does everyone choose to be in the midst of it? That's the big question.
Yeah.
Where do you want to be? Do you want to be caught up in that flow? Do you want to be caught up in that turmoil and that chaos? Or do you want to take a breath and say, amidst all that information, all that influx, all that confusing discord, as you said, I'm going to find my center and what's true for me and focus there first.
Yeah, it's a big job. There's so much to know about. Being an American, or being any kind of a citizen, requires knowing what the issues are. And it's hard to find out what they are. And it can be overwhelming. We tend to cruise, in neutral, just as long as it doesn't affect our lives personally. Yeah, we feel bad about the things that aren't right. And we know they're wrong. And we've got the answers for it. And in our hearts, we know the right direction to go. It's like what you're saying. And yet at the same time, we got jobs, we got families, we've got times that are hard. We're in an economic time that's really challenging. We're close to a civil war going on. And to be calm in that setting is really hard. Maybe it's about spending more time, meditating and finding where your center point is. And then finding a way to take action, because you can't just do nothing. Doing nothing gets you into trouble. At least don't be violent about it if you can. I think our first knee-jerk reaction is, I'm going to fight back. I'll show those guys what I'm going to do. And it gets us exactly where we are.
And everyone's doing that to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Everyone has that knee-jerk reaction, whether it's your anger emotion or your sadness, grief emotion, or your worry. These kinds of things are natural to happen. And it's our inner battle that takes place. It's when we haven't resolved that inner battle. Sounds kind of cliche, but when you haven't got settled on where you stand, then you react.
Yeah.
And it is important to find that time to meditate. It is important to find that time to find your inner quiet and get away, and maybe sometimes disconnect from all that input for a bit, and then return back to the news or the social media with that centered place rather than an uncentered place, right? Don't you think that would be a little bit better place to approach this information from?
Well, at least it makes sense. And your heart usually has the right answers. And you know, things happen for a reason. I believe that everything happens
Sure.
for a reason. And it creates opportunity. And the opportunities are challenging. And they take every bit of energy we can possibly have just to get through life. And then something is on top of that. And it's like we go off the deep end. And then where do you go? And that's when you really have, when the going gets tough, that's when you got to get going yourself to be tough to deal with the problem. And we can do that as a country. We have this history. We've gone through more battles and solved more problems because we have dug down deep and we paid attention to how things turn out. When there's a disaster, we're colossal at sticking together. We wake up, we do the right thing, and we do it at all costs. And we put other people first. We don't put ourselves first. And it's that giving and sharing and loving and building community that stands out when we're under pressure. But not under pressure, you got to light a candle under somebody's rear end to get them to go from one step to the next. And that's too bad, because that's the hard way to do it. And we're under great duress now with a great opportunity to make a giant step forward in our history.
And that's how evolution happens.
Yep.
Evolution never happens in a gentle way. It's always a chaotic flux. It's always a massive shift of energy. It takes that energy to go in and make the changes. And that's where we are right now.
Yeah.
And it happens throughout history, but right now we are living history. And we are so fortunate. And people complain and feel like their, lives are disrupted. But right now we are living in history.
Yep.
And I hope we can ask ourselves, where do you want to see yourself when you look a year ahead or 5 years ahead, and say, what were you doing during this time? What were you thinking during this time?
Right.
Who are you?
Sure.
Were you willing to see this as a transformation on a personal level, as well as the community, social, international level?
Well, thank God we're getting help. We've got help. Our intuition is a tremendous thing. If we rely on what our hearts are telling us through our intuition and our imagination, we come to answers we didn't know we have. And it's wonderful to have, I call them angels, that they're standing by, and I'm suffering, and I'm looking for answers, and I'll go to bed with an intent of just resting and being open. And when I'm open like that, it's like magic comes through. I get my best ideas, and they're not mine. They're ideas that are shared with me from what I would call Akashic records. And when those come through you and they're there for you to pluck and to make sense out of, then all of a sudden there are answers to things that you go, oh, that wasn't so difficult. This is what I had to do. And you can be clear about it. It's great to have help and support.
But it takes that quiet. It takes that moment, doesn't it? Where you say, I let go. I have to
letting go. It's about letting go.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds so cliche as well, right? To say let go, but it's critical, because what everyone seems to be doing now is holding on. And what do we hold on to, right? We're holding on to belief systems. We're holding on to wishes that it was a certain way. We're holding on to expectations and anticipations. And this is what gets us into big trouble.
Well, we're holding on to being victims too.
Holding on to,
and that may be the most damaging of all.
But imagine if you could let go of that and say, for a moment, maybe I'm not a victim, but maybe this is, as you said, absolutely critical for my personal growth. I mean, I know the world's chaotic, but maybe this whole stuff that's happening in the world is actually just what I need in my life to trigger me, to wake me up, and to remind me what's really important.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And when you're confused and you don't know what to do, that's the time, if you will just let go, that you can be at one with the universe, if you will. For me, that's such a sacred experience. If some people go to church for it, I go within myself. I like having the things come through me, rather than me having been told what to do by some intermediary force that's another human being. The idea of trusting my maker and trusting the angels that are around me to make decisions is so comforting. And when I have that trust and faith, miracles happen. At least what I think are miracles. They're not really miracles at all, but they're things that wouldn't happen if I wouldn't let go and say, Please, I need help. What do we do? And then just let it go and see what happens. I can remember a couple of times in my life when I was near death. And I remember one time I was having a triple bypass for a heart problem that I had a few years
I
ago.
remember, yes.
And I was at peace with that because I knew that what was happening had a purpose. And I was comfortable with that, even though I knew I had a life-threatening experience in front of me. That night, I slept like a baby.
Hmm.
And when I woke up after the surgery, my heart opened up. And there was a kind of love that just filled me. It was so, I'll never forget the feeling. And it stayed with me. It was like a nudge from the universe that said, I'll help you. Just trust me and move on with that with courage. And if you'll do that, things will work out for you the way they need to work out. And whatever it is, that's okay with me. And that's why I slept.
That's right. But it wasn't your mind, that intellectual mind. It wasn't that mind that's the survival mind.
Right.
It was that heart. It was your heart opened up, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yes. Well, we deify the mind, and that gets us in all kinds of trouble. And if we just we just rely on our imagination, our intuition, and have trust and faith, we don't have to do anything. We just have to be present. And if you're present, that's all. That's the ticket. And it sounds simple, and it is, but it's not. You have to learn that. I was 78 when I learned that lesson.
You have to unlearn a lot to learn that.
And that's hard.
You have to unlearn a lifetime of thinking with the mind and the head. But you know, the ancients, if you look at a lot of ancient traditions, Len, we know that the thinking in the ancient times was always from the heart.
Yeah.
They believe in the traditional Chinese Taoist approach, they call it the Shen Qi or the spirit Qi. And that was a heart-centered mind.
Yeah.
They never thought, that's why the head and the nervous system was never part of traditional Chinese medicine.
I love that.
The heart was where you thought from. And you look back in Greece and you look back in Africa cultures all over, you realize the wisdom holders knew that the heart was where you thought from.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think it's the trust and the faith, okay, that you are connected and you are being taken care of. I mean, you were made by the Creator.
Yes.
You have to be, in essence, the Creator as well, because you can't be anything different. The Creator made you. And I think we go through life as a partnership. And I'm not so sure that the Creator knows all the answers, and it's why the Creator created us. And so that Creator could have the experience through us and with us of the things we're doing. So we're being guided through all this with the power of our Creator, because we are made by that Creator and we are a part of that Creator, and it's inseparable. When you know that, trust and faith flourishes and things start to happen. And it takes such a long time in this world that is so dualistic, where we think about I, me, my, and mine is the number one thing. And when we forget that, but we know that we're absolutely important or we wouldn't be here, then we can change and we can be a team, and we can build community. We can operate from love. It's such perfection that it's hard to believe. And as I get older and I respect that, I'm so comforted by that. And I don't have the same fears I used to have when I was much younger. And I didn't trust.
Fear only comes from separation.
Exactly.
And it's really a subset definition of fear.
Yes,
when you think about it, and the primitive man felt separate from the dark night, and everything was other, and everything was a threat.
Yeah.
But when you had faith and spirit came in, all of a sudden you realized that you were part of that night. You were part of the animal spirits. You were part of that darkness and the thunder. And it became part and parcel of this grand spirit that you were embodied in.
Right.
And it wasn't so scary anymore.
Yeah.
Now you gave it a name. In the ancient times, they gave names to these things, and so they weren't so scary. And I think we need to take on that same shamanic approach to the modern world.
Yeah.
And give names to these scary things to realize they are part of our unfolding. As you said, we are infinite consciousness, knowing itself through this human experience.
Yes.
It all fits. It fits beautifully.
Yeah. Well, the separation we have from God, if you will, is the most serious of them all. And you're talking about various aspects of that, and I agree with you. When we have that separation, then we're alone. And when we're alone, the fear comes in because we've lost our control. It's the trust and faith that gives us some semblance of control, because we know that we're being taken care of by the entity that made us. And you can't argue with, you came from someplace. Give it
Hmm.
credit to at least Mother Nature.
That's right. And we know when we find solutions, it's when we've gotten out of our little mind, that little intellectual mind, that worrying mind. And when we let go into that bigger sense of self. And
Hmm.
that's when the solutions come. And that's when we find friends and we find community and we find systems that all of a sudden are supportive and loving, because we see self and community as the same mirror reflection.
Oh, you're so right.
You
And
know, and that's big. And when we can feel that, not just in words but in action, all of a sudden it's just falls out of that we work together, we find solutions, we understand empathetically what other people are feeling, and we don't
yeah,
judge them. We say, yeah, it's
yeah,
legitimate. Now
yeah, yeah.
how do we find the mesh here?
You have to experience it.
Yeah.
And that takes time. Some things are hard to experience. You can't show a blind man how to experience vision, but you can experience things if they're intended for you to have. And the experience that we have with the connection in our community is what really is the salvation of humanity. And if we stick with our humanity, where all human beings are in the same club and we're trying to flourish as a giant club, then all of a sudden things are easy and they happen almost automatically. You don't have to work for it. You have to let go and let it happen. And when it does, that's what we want. And that's why we bind together in times that are horrible. You know, the tsunami or the earthquake or a volcano is erupting. We're right there. You need help? I'll help you. What do you want? I'll give you the shirt off my back. And you see that all the time. But in the absence of stuff like that, we have to be remembered. We have to remember that we have this in us, and we find that, and that's when we learn about more trust and faith, and about how to operate as a humanity.
It's hard to trust, Len, when you watch the news and you
Oh,
look at social media. If you observe it, it's designed to keep you from trusting. Everything about
exactly.
headlines are written to not trust and to be drawn in by being threatened or by being questioned.
Hmm.
I went to university a couple of times, but after my pre-med stint, I went back to political science at George Washington University. And I did research on the news. This was back in the 70s
Oh, wow.
when it was only four networks, and it was easy to go through the networks and analyze the words that were used in the news. And let me tell you, nothing has changed in
Yeah,
40 years.
yeah, it's gotten worse.
It's gotten worse because a lot of those kids who went to psychology and philosophy classes like me are now working there, and they have too much intellectual knowledge on how to manipulate other people. And
Yeah,
that's what the media is about, because that's how you make money. So we have to say that, because you have to remember that you are immersed in a world of being manipulated, and trust is being chipped away at everything you do, everything you buy, every commercial you see, every bit of media that you watch. So it's okay to know that. But that's why it's so important to find that strength in yourself,
yeah.
to find the trust, not from the news or from situations getting resolved, but from that sense of being part of something much bigger.
The inside. Yeah, that's where it is. We need to we need to center ourselves the best that we can at all times, if we can, to
Yeah.
try and know what the right way to go is. And today with the news, you can't even get the news out there because it's blocked. A lot of news is not news really. They just have a few stations that all say the same sound bites that convince you that what you're hearing is correct. And it's like you're being brainwashed. It's like Chinese water torture. You hear it over and over and over, and all of a sudden you begin to believe these things. You even start to dream them in your dreams until
Yeah.
you realize how you're being manipulated. And all this is about separation. They're separating us from our people, different races, from different religions, from different economic standpoints, from every angle that you can imagine. And then,
Politics. I mean,
oh yeah,
it's that whole concept. It's so part of understanding the art of war called divide and conquer.
Exactly.
You know, and if you get angry, then it means that you've got caught up
That's exactly.
in those people or that system or that media entourage
Yeah.
dividing you and finding that place in you that's divided. When you can stay whole, you're in your power and no one can touch you.
Yeah. Well, literally, it's a challenge to become whole again. And as
Yeah,
you be, it's a holistic concept. There's a holism between you and your family, and between you and your neighbors, and with your state and with your country. And there's a unity in the globe, and there's a unity in humanity, and there's a whole connection with all that there is, and maybe beyond that. And when we can feel that, because we will let go and let it happen, magic happens. And the joy that comes from being connected and enjoying seeing other people flourish is what it's, I think that's what this trip around for me in this life has been about. It's going from all about me to all about what I can give. It's like JFK said in his one of his speeches years ago. It's not about don't expect your country to do everything for you.
yeah,
Think about what you can do for your country. And I would take that a step further and say, do what you can for humanity and all living things.
sure.
Well,
It's beautiful, and I think that's what we're seeing right now is people are struggling to try to find what that means. So I have a lot of open-heartedness to all that's happening in the world right now because I
yeah,
understand how far away we've all become from that sense of wholeness, from that sense of inner peace.
that's
And
right.
I really ask everybody to try to find some time in the day to turn off the media. It's great that
Yeah,
you're watching this now, but
yes,
find the time now after this and shut down and find some quiet. And don't just go to sleep,
that's so right.
but just listen to your breath. Take 2 minutes or 3 minutes just to breathe with your eyes closed
Yeah,
and remember that all this fits in perfectly. And
yeah,
this is all part of your growth. And this is all part of the unfolding that the world needs right now.
yeah. Well, we can practice that.
We can
You,
practice it, Len. Yes.
you want to feed the wolf that you want to grow. You know that story.
Yeah, sure.
And so that takes effort, but then it takes none, because you're present and you're not being asked to think about anything. You're asked to let go and see what comes to mind and find out what gifts are going to be offered, because they will be if you stay. And if you have expectations of being fixed by somebody, you can forget that.
Yeah.
That has to come from the inside, and it's a spontaneous thing. So this is good stuff, Francesco.
And it's just, and we're in the healing world and we're talking about all this, but in health and wellness, it's the same thing. Until we can see our body whole, until we can see all these organ systems working together and then use the mind, body, and spirit wholeness to bring us
Yes,
into peace, this is when we see spontaneous healing. This is when we see people go into remission and stay there for
that's
decades.
that's exactly right. Well, this is a great place to close. I
Yeah,
want to thank you so much. It's so much fun working with you, because I find that sacred space. This is like a meditation for me when I'm with you,
it
to
is.
be able to let and see what comes out of it. So you're listening to A Voice of Reason. Thank you all for listening. We'll be back on another show tomorrow. So have a great night.
Mhm.
Thanks.